The rain on Concord Academy was not real. It fell from ceiling vents on the parade ground, calibrated to the exact weight and rhythm that 200 different species could agree to call weather. Some cadets opened their gills. Some cadets opened umbrellas. One cadet, a small human at the end of the line, just tilted her face up and smiled, as if the fake rain were a gift. Senior Drill Master Valen noticed the smile. She filed it under things to correct later. Valen walked the length of the new cohort with her hands folded behind her back. Her boots clicked on the wet stone. Her two-ear fins, the pride of every Crechery elder, were pinned flat against her skull in the formal teaching pose. She had stood this way in front of 40 cohorts before this one. She knew, without looking, how each species would react to her opening line. She stopped at the center of the parade ground. The cadets stiffened. "Know your limits," she said. Her voice carried without a microphone. "The body is honest. The mind lies." The Morkin cadet at the front nodded so hard his bone plate shoulders rattled. The Brenari grappler folded all 4 of his arms in respect. The Scythen twins flickered through 3 colors of agreement. The Drovok heavy trooper stood as still as the silicon plates of his face would allow. The human at the end of the line was still smiling at the rain. Valen walked to her. She was a head shorter than every other cadet on the field. Her uniform did not fit her well. Her name patch read, Reyes, H, in plain Concord letters. Valen pulled up the human's file on her wrist datapad. She read it. She read it again. The strength figure was wrong. It had to be. So was the pain threshold. So was the recovery window. Valen had seen tougher numbers on a Crechery child of 6. She glanced down at the human cadet, who looked back up at her with the polite, patient expression of someone waiting for instructions. "Cadet Reyes," Valen said. "Ma'am, your species file lists your maximum lift as 40 kilograms. "Yes, ma'am. Is that correct?" The human paused. She seemed to think about it. Then she said, "I think that's what they wrote down, ma'am." It was not a yes. It was not a no. Valen marked the answer as evasive and moved on. The first day of training was a basic conditioning circuit. Valen calibrated each station to 30% of each cadet's filed maximum, the standard warm-up load. The human station read 12 kilograms across the lift bars. Valen expected the human to struggle. She expected, in fact, that the human might need to drop out by Station 4. The Morkin finished his warm-up in 9 minutes. The Brenari, slowed by 4 sets of arms doing 4 different things, took 12. The Drovok took 15. The Scythen twins took 18, because they kept stopping to discuss strategy with each other in soft pulses of light. The human finished in 4 minutes. She walked over to Valen, polite and small and not even out of breath. "Ma'am, I think I was going too fast. I'm sorry. I can slow down for the next set if it helps the squad pace." Valen stared at her. Then she stared at the lift bars. Then she walked over to the bars herself, lifted one, set it down, and walked back without speaking. The bars were correctly weighted. The human was not cheating. The Brenari grappler caught the Scythen twins' eyes. A small bet passed between them in 3 flickers. The Morkin tried to pretend he had not seen anything. Valen dismissed the cohort early. She told herself it was because the rain was getting heavy. The rain was not getting heavy. The vents had been steady all afternoon. That night, in her private quarters, she ran a full diagnostic on the conditioning equipment. It came back clean. She ran a diagnostic on her datapad. It came back clean. She ran a diagnostic on the human species file. It came back as current, no amendments since human admission to the Concord, 16 standard years. Valen sat at her desk for a long time. She had been teaching for 40 solar cycles. Her teaching rested on one simple idea, the idea carved into the wall behind her office desk. The body is honest. A cadet might lie about being tired. A cadet might pretend to be stronger than they were. But the body, when pushed, always told the truth. A filed limit was a promise from biology. You did not break it without breaking yourself. The human's body, today, had not been pushed. The human's body, today, had been gently introduced to a warm-up. And the warm-up had been, for it, nothing at all. Valen opened a query window. She typed a polite, formal request to the Concord Medical Bureau. She asked whether the human species profile had been updated recently. She asked whether there was, perhaps, a footnote she had missed. The Bureau replied 6 hours later. The reply said the file was current. No footnotes. No amendments. No corrections on record. Valin closed the query. She did not yet think the file was wrong. She thought the human was hiding something. Cadets sometimes did, when they were nervous on the first day. Cadets sometimes performed beyond their limits when they were trying to impress. The body, eventually, would tell the truth. She would push the human, tomorrow, until the body spoke. She turned off her desk lamp. Outside her window, the fake rain kept falling. She did not see the small human cadet in the courtyard below, standing alone in the downpour, still smiling up at the vents. The chair had straps for 11 different body shapes. The Drovok heavy trooper sat in it first, and his silicon shoulders barely fit between the armrests. He looked nervous. Every cadet looked nervous in this chair, because every cadet had heard the stories about it. The pain tolerance acclimation chair was a Concord training tool, not a punishment. It sent small, controlled neural pulses through a soft cap fitted to the cadet's head. The point was not to hurt the cadet. The point was to teach the cadet to think, speak, and move while uncomfortable. A real peacekeeper, the Concord taught, did not get to stop working just because something hurt. Valin stood beside the chair with her datapad. She set the Drovok to level 3, which was the standard starting point for a cadet of his species and weight. The pulses began. The Drovok's silicon face cracked into a tight, controlled grimace. By level 4, small tears were sliding down the grooves of his cheeks. He did not cry out. He held the chair's arms and breathed through his vents, exactly as his species was taught. Valin stopped him at level 5. She praised him. The Drovok stood up, shaky but proud, and rejoined the squad. The Morkin went next. He lasted to level 4 before he asked, politely, to stop. The Brenari went after him. He lasted to level 5, and used all 4 arms to grip the chair, and looked, when he stood up, like a soldier who had earned something. The Scythen twins went together. They lasted to level 4. They cried in soft pulses of blue. The human went last. She sat down in the chair. The straps did not really need to be tied on her, because she was so small. The neural cap had to be folded in twice to fit her head. She put her hands in her lap. She smiled politely at Valin. Valin set the chair to level 1. The human waited. After a moment, she raised a hand, the way a student raises a hand in a classroom. Yes, Cadet Reyes, Valin said. Ma'am, is the machine on? The squad behind Valin went very quiet. Valin checked the chair's display. The display said level 1. The pulse light was green. The chair was working correctly. She raised the setting to level 2. The human waited again. She tilted her head a little, like a person listening for a faint sound. Then she said, Should I be feeling something specific, ma'am? I don't want to miss it. The Brenari grappler made a small, choked noise behind Valin. She did not turn around. Valin raised the setting to level 3. This was the Drovok's starting point. This was the point at which the silicon-skinned heavy trooper had begun to grimace. The human blinked, twice. Then she said, Oh, there's a little pressure now. Like a headache, but small. Thank you, ma'am. Valin went to level 4. The human said, It's a bit stronger now. I'm okay. Valin went to level 5. This was the level at which she had stopped the Drovok. This was a level the Concord considered a strong test, even for tough species. The human said, Oh, that's quite something, ma'am. She paused. May I ask, ma'am, would it be all right if I read while it runs? I have a book on my datapad. The squad had stopped breathing. The Brenari grappler was clutching all 4 of his arms across his chest, as if he were physically holding his laughter inside his body. The Scythen twins had gone completely white with disbelief. Valin did not answer the question about the book. She raised the setting to level 6. This was past the Concord's filed safe limit for humans. By the file on her datapad, a human at level 6 should have been screaming. A human at level 6 should have been losing consciousness. The chair should have automatically cut out by now to protect the cadet. The chair did not cut out. The human did not scream. The human said, in a slightly tighter voice, Ma'am, that's actually pain now. I'd say maybe a 4 out of 10 on the scale we use back home. Should I keep going? Valin stopped the chair. She unstrapped the human in silence. She told the squad they were dismissed for the day. She told them, in her firmest voice, that what they had seen was a calibration issue and should not be discussed. The Brenari grappler nodded with the face of a being who was definitely going to discuss it. That evening, Valen sat alone in her office. She pulled up the chair's recording. She watched the human's vital signs across all 6 levels. Heart rate, slightly elevated. Breathing, steady. Cortisol response, present, but managed. No signs of distress. No signs of deception, either. The human had not been faking calm. The human had actually been calm. Valen looked at the carved words on the wall behind her desk. The body is honest. The mind lies. The human's body had been honest. The honest answer was that level 6 was a 4 out of 10. Valen poured herself a cup of stem tea. She did not drink it. She watched it go cold on her desk. She had taught for 40 cycles on the idea that a filed limit was the truth of a species. Tonight, for the first time, she allowed herself to consider a different idea. She allowed herself to consider that the file might be wrong. She did not yet allow herself to consider how wrong. That would come later. Tonight, she only allowed the small thought, and she sat with it, and she let her tea go cold, and the carved words on her wall watched her in silence. She decided. Tomorrow, she would find the human's real limit. For the human's safety, she told herself. Not for her own. A wind that did not exist howled across a tundra that was not real. Squadron Theta stepped through the simulation gate at dawn, and the gate sealed behind them, and the academy disappeared. What stretched in front of them now was a continent built for breaking people. Ice in the north. Volcanic ridges in the middle. Thin air highlands at the end. 40 hours, on foot, with packs. The cadets did not know that each of their packs had been loaded individually. They did not know that each of their routes had been bent, slightly, to push them right up to the edge of their filed species limit. The Concord considered this kind of training cruel, but fair. The body, the saying went, learned best at its honest edge. Only Valen knew that the human's route did not bend toward her limit. Valen had set the human's route to a path that, according to the file, should have killed her by hour 12. Cold past tolerance. Climbs past muscle. Air thinner than human lungs were filed to breathe. Valen watched the squad set off from the command tower above the simulation. She told herself she would pull the human out the moment her vitals dropped. She had a medical drone ready. She was not a cruel instructor. She only needed to know. The Morkin dropped at hour 18. He vomited in the thin air of the highlands, and his bone plate shoulders, so proud on the parade ground, slumped against a rock. The simulation lifted him out with a soft tone of respect. He had reached his filed limit. He had done well. The Scythen twins dropped at hour 26. They had been holding hands and synchronized pulses for the last 6 kilometers. The simulation took them up together. The Brenari grappler made it to hour 31. The volcanic ridge zone was meant for him. It was where his species had evolved. But the route had bent his path through a crack in the ridge where the gas vents were thickest, and his 4 arms could not climb fast enough to clear the worst pocket. He sank to one knee, smiling, and waved a hand at the sky. He had earned his standing. In the command tower, Valen's other instructors were watching the human's monitor with open mouths. The human was humming. She had not stopped moving since hour 1. She had walked through the ice belt at hour 6 without slowing down. She had crossed the volcanic ridge at hour 20 without coughing once. She had paused, twice, on the route. The first pause was 4 minutes long. Valen had assumed it was a collapse. The replay showed the human kneeling beside a wounded simulation animal, a small 4-legged creature the Concord put into the terrain for atmosphere. The human had wrapped the animal's leg with a strip torn from her own sleeve. Then she had stood up and kept walking. The second pause was 11 minutes. Valen had assumed it was the end. The replay showed the human standing over the Brenari grappler at his collapse point, even though the human's route did not pass near him. She had walked off her route to find him. She had fixed his fallen beacon, made sure the medical lift was coming for him, said something kind to him in her soft human voice, and only then walked back to her own route and kept going. At hour 35, the human entered the thin air highlands. The air pressure on her route was set to a level the file said no human could survive for more than 6 minutes. She walked through it for 5 hours. Valen did not blink. She did not drink her tea, which had once again gone cold beside her. She did not speak to her staff, who had also stopped speaking. The tower was a quiet room with 3 Kresheri and 1 Drovok and the soft sound of a human humming through a speaker. At hour 40, the human stepped out of the simulation gate. She was breathing harder than usual. Her uniform was torn at one sleeve. Her cheeks were a little flushed. She looked, to anyone who did not know better, like a cadet who had finished a difficult run. She walked up to Valin, who had come down from the tower to meet her at the gate, and she said, "I'm sorry I'm late, ma'am. I stopped to help." Valin did not respond. She could not find words in her own language for what she had just watched. The human, polite as ever, waited. When Valin still did not speak, the human added, helpfully, "The simulation animal is okay, ma'am. And the Brenari was already being lifted out when I got to him. I just wanted to make sure." Valin dismissed her in a voice that did not sound like her own. She watched the small human walk away across the parade ground, toward the showers, toward the barracks, toward whatever a human did at the end of a 40-hour march. The other cadets, the ones who had been lifted out, were already in the medical wing, on drips, on warm packs, recovering. The human, by all signs, was going to eat dinner. Valin walked alone back to her office. She poured another cup of stem tea. She set it down beside the other cup of stem tea, the one from yesterday, which was still sitting on her desk, cold and forgotten. She thought, for the first time in 40 cycles, that perhaps her teaching had been built on bad data. Not partly bad, not slightly bad, fundamentally, structurally bad. The file on her datapad was not just incomplete. It was wrong on a scale she did not yet have words for. She was just beginning to sit with that thought when there was a soft knock at her office door. The human stood in the hallway, polite and small and slightly damp from the showers. She looked up at Valin with that same careful expression and said, "Ma'am, may I ask you something? The drills, could they be made a little harder? I don't want to fall behind the squad in challenge." Valin stared at her. The cold tea stared at Valin. The human waited, patiently, for an answer. Valin's office was small, by Crechery standards, and that was on purpose. A teaching office was meant to be a place where a cadet sat across from an instructor, knee to knee, and could not look away. There were no plants. There were no soft cushions. There was a desk, 2 chairs, a wall of carved words, and a window that looked out over the parade ground. The human sat in the cadet chair with her hands folded in her lap. She looked, as always, polite and small and patient. Valin closed the door. She walked to her side of the desk. She did not sit down. She set her datapad face down on the wood. She folded her hands. She looked at the human across the desk, and for the first time in 40 cycles of teaching, she asked a question she did not know the answer to. "Cadet Reyes," she said, "what is your actual limit?" The human thought about it. She really thought about it, the way a polite student thinks about a difficult exam question. She did not rush. She did not give a quick answer to be helpful. She sat with the question, turned it over, and finally said, "I don't know, ma'am." Valin waited. The human went on, slowly. "I've never really found one. I've been tired. I've been hurt. I've been cold. But I don't think I've ever hit a place where my body said, 'That's it. No more.'" She paused. "I'm not sure humans look for it the way other species do. We sort of just keep walking until something stops us, and most of the time, nothing does." Valin sat down slowly. "Where did your filed limit profile come from, cadet?" The human shrugged. It was a small, soft shrug, almost an apology for not knowing. "I think someone copied it from an old medical handbook, ma'am. When we joined the Concord, I don't think anyone on Earth really paid attention to what we sent. We were just glad to be invited." Valin stared at her datapad on the desk. She did not pick it up. "Tell me about your family," she said. The human looked surprised. Then she smiled, and the smile was different from her usual polite one. It was warmer. It was the smile of someone remembering people she loved. "My grandmother walked out of an avalanche when she was 71, she said. "On Earth. In the mountains where we grew up. She was buried for a long time. She dug herself out. She walked 6 kilometers down a slope in bad weather and knocked on a stranger's door, and the stranger thought she was a ghost. She lived another 15 years after that. She used to laugh about it." Valin did not speak. "My father carried his friend 12 kilometers once," the human said. "His friend had a broken leg. They were hiking. My father did not stop. He talked to his friend the whole way, to keep him awake. He told me, later, that he did not feel tired until he got to the road. Then he sat down and could not stand up for 2 hours. And then he stood up." The human paused and added, gently, as if she did not want to overwhelm her instructor, "My mother trained sled dogs. In conditions the squadron has not simulated yet. She is 64. She still goes out in the winter. Valen's ear fins moved, just slightly, against her will. It was the smallest sign of shock a Cresheri could show. Cadet Reyes, she said, are you the strongest of your kind? The human laughed. Actually laughed. It was a soft, surprised laugh, as if the question were a joke she had not been ready for. No, ma'am, she said. I would not even make my hometown's marathon team. I'm average. I'm really, truly average, by any honest human measurement. There are people on Earth who would find this academy easy. Valen felt the room move around her. Not really. She was sitting still, but something inside her was moving, the way the ground moves during a small quake, and you only know it later from looking at the cracks. She looked at the carved words on her wall. The body is honest. The mind lies. She had built a teaching career on those words. She had said them to thousands of cadets. She had believed, every time, that a filed limit was the truth of a species, the one thing that did not lie. The body, she had told her students, was a contract you signed before you were born. But here was a species that read the contract, smiled politely, and renegotiated it on a Tuesday afternoon. Here was a species that did not even bother to track its own limits, because limits, to them, were a starting offer. You do not test your edges? Valen asked quietly. We test them all the time, ma'am, the human said. But we don't write them down. The point isn't to find the edge. The point is to make the edge move. Valen was very still. The human, sensing perhaps that she had said something heavier than she intended, added, kindly, I think we forgot to mention that in the paperwork. For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the hum of the wall lights. Then Valen picked up her datapad. She opened the formal request system. She typed, with steady fingers, a request to the Concord Medical Bureau for a full re-audit of humanity's filed species profile. She marked it priority. She signed it with her full title and 40-cycle service rank. She sent it. The reply came faster than yesterday's. The reply said her request required council approval. The reply said the audit might take 6 standard months. Valen read the reply twice. She did not curse. Cresheri did not really curse. But she set the datapad down with a little more force than was needed. The graduation trials were in 2 weeks. She looked across the desk at the small, polite human who was waiting to be dismissed. She did not dismiss her yet. She sat with the silence a moment longer. Then she said, in a voice that did not carry her old certainty, Thank you, cadet. You may go. The human stood up. She nodded politely. At the door, she paused. Ma'am. Yes. Sorry about the paperwork. She closed the door softly behind her. Valen did not move for a long time. The carved words on her wall watched her, and for the first time, she did not look back at them with pride. She looked at them with something closer to embarrassment. The smirk she had worn for 40 cycles, the one she had used to open every lecture, did not return for the rest of the day. It would not return for many days. Banners hung from every column of the great arena. Each banner was the color of a different academy, and there were 60 academies in the Concord, and the banners stretched from the high dome of the arena all the way down to the sand. 40,000 spectators filled the stands. 12 council observers sat on the raised platform, wrapped in formal robes, scrolls of judgment in their laps. The graduation trials were the most watched event in the Concord calendar, and today, for the first time in years, every seat was full. Squadron Theta walked into the arena in formation. The Brenari Grappler was at the front. The Drovok Heavy Trooper was at the back. The Morkin and the Scythen twins were in the middle. And at the very end of the line, walking with that same calm, polite step, was the small human. The crowd noticed her. The crowd laughed. It was not a cruel laugh, exactly. It was the laugh of a crowd that did not expect a small species near the bottom of the Concord's physical tier to be entered in a real competition. A few cadets from other academies made jokes loud enough to carry. One of them mimed picking up the human and putting her in his pocket. The crowd laughed harder. The human did not seem to hear. Or, more likely, she heard, and decided it did not matter. The first event was the obstacle gauntlet. 42 stations of climbing, jumping, swinging, balancing, and crawling, all timed, all scored, all watched by the council. The Brenari Grappler was a favorite to win. He had trained for this event his whole academy career. He finished it in 6 minutes, 11 seconds, which was a personal best. The arena applauded. The human finished it in 4 minutes, 40 seconds. The arena did not applaud. The arena went quiet. A council observer leaned forward in his seat. The crowd assumed a malfunction. The clock was checked. The clock was correct. The human had simply done it faster. She had not even looked tired at the end. She had stood on the finish mat and brushed dust off her uniform. The second event was marksmanship endurance. 3 hours of precision shooting, with targets that grew smaller and faster, with weapons that grew heavier in the hand. The Drovok heavy trooper was the favorite here. His silicon hands did not shake. He finished with a respectable score. The crowd applauded. The human placed first. The crowd assumed luck. The council observer leaned a little further forward. The third event was the grappling tournament. This was meant to be a slaughter for the human. She was, by any honest measure, the smallest cadet in the arena. Her first opponent was a Brennari from a rival academy, twice her size, for armed, trained from childhood in close combat. The crowd settled in to watch a quick match. The match was not quick. The human did not attack. She circled. She waited. She let the Brennari rush her 3 times, slipping each rush with small, polite movements, the way someone steps out of the way of a child running through a hallway. The Brennari grew tired. His forearms began to slow. The crowd began to notice that the small human was not the one breathing hard. In the 4th minute, the Brennari overextended one of his lower arms. The human took it, turned with it, and brought the Brennari down to the sand with a movement so quiet that for a moment the crowd was not sure what had happened. Then the referee's count began. The Brennari, pinned by his own weight and the human's careful angle, could not move. The count finished. The match was over. The arena did not laugh anymore. The human went on to win the grappling tournament. She did not raise her arms in victory. She bowed politely to each opponent after pinning them, and helped them up, and apologized once, softly, to a cadet who had hit the sand harder than she meant. The council observer was now standing. He raised a hand. The trials paused. The arena fell silent. "This proceeding will halt," the observer said, his voice carried through the dome by the formal speakers. "The human cadet will present herself. The instructor of Squadron Theta will present herself. I demand to know whether this cadet has been doped, modified, or augmented." The human looked up at the platform. She looked, for the first time, slightly embarrassed. She had not meant to be the center of attention. She had only meant to not let her squad down. Valen stepped forward. She walked across the sand alone. Her ear fins were no longer pinned in the formal teaching pose. They were standing up, the way a Creshery's fins stood up when she was about to say something that mattered. She stopped in front of the platform. She looked up at the council. She did not bow as deeply as protocol required. She did not seem to remember to. "Esteemed council," she said, "I have served as a senior drill master at this academy for 40 solar cycles. In that time I have trained cadets from over 100 species. I have filed and reviewed every species limit profile that has crossed my desk. I tell you now, on the record, that the filed profile for humanity is incorrect by at least 2 orders of magnitude on multiple measurements." A murmur ran through the arena. "This cadet has not been doped," Valen went on. "She has not been modified. She has not been augmented. I have monitored her for 6 weeks. I have pushed her past every limit her file describes. I have not, in those 6 weeks, found a single point at which her body said no." The council observer's mouth was slightly open. He closed it. "The file says, 'Know your limits,'" Valen said. "It is the saying of my career. I have repeated it 10,000 times to 10,000 cadets. I tell you now, esteemed council, that this cadet does not appear to have any limits I can find. And I do not believe she is special among her kind. I believe she is, by her own honest account, average." The arena was completely silent. Then a small voice from the sand said, "Ma'am." Valen looked down. The human was beside her, polite and small and waiting. "Yes, cadet. May I please go finish the trials, ma'am? I don't want to let my squad down." The council ordered the audit fast-tracked that afternoon. Earth was contacted within the hour. The reply from Earth came that evening. The reply was brief. It said, "We did wonder when you would ask. 6 weeks is not a long time in a Creshery's life. A Creshery can live 200 solar cycles, and 6 weeks barely counts as a season. But 6 weeks, after the trials, was enough time for the Concord Medical Bureau to issue a formal correction to humanity's species file. 6 weeks was enough time for that correction to ripple out across 60 academies. 6 weeks was enough time for Cadet Reyes, now Junior Peacekeeper Reyes, to be deployed to the Outer Rim, where reports of her arrival were already trickling back through Concord channels. 6 weeks was also enough time for a new cohort of cadets to arrive at Concord Academy. They stood on the parade ground in the early morning. The fake rain was not falling today. The vents were quiet. The light was the soft gold of a Crescery sunrise, scheduled and calibrated, but pretty all the same. The cadets stood at attention, nervous, proud, far from their homes. There were 420 of them, from 47 different species. And at the end of one line, almost too small to see, stood a single human cadet. He was thin, polite, and slightly damp from the showers. He looked, when Senior Drill Master Valen walked past him, like he was trying very hard not to smile. Valen did not pin her ear fins flat against her skull this morning. She had walked from her office to the parade ground in silence. Her assistant had followed her, carrying her datapad. Behind her, in her office, the carved wall had been scraped clean. The slab was freshly resurfaced. The old words were gone. The new words had not yet been engraved. She had decided what the new words would say only that morning. She stopped at the center of the parade ground. The cadets stiffened. 47 species, all expecting the famous opening line. Several of the instructors who had served under Valen for years stood at the edges of the field, ready to mouth the words along with her, the way they always did. The body is honest. The mind lies. Valen looked at the cohort. She looked at the small human at the end of the line. She looked at her own hands, folded behind her back. She began. Cadets, she said. For 40 solar cycles I have stood on this ground and told new cohorts to know their limits. I have told you that the body is honest. I have told you that the mind lies. I have built every lesson, every drill, every assessment around those words. The instructors at the edges of the field began to relax. The familiar lecture. The familiar rhythm. I was wrong, Valen said. The relaxation stopped. The body, Valen went on, does not tell the truth. The body fills out paperwork. The body files a number, and the number is convenient, and the number is wrong. She paused. The mind is what audits the paperwork. The mind is what decides whether the number is the end of the story or only the beginning. The cadets did not move. They were not sure yet whether this was the lecture or whether they had walked into a different lecture by mistake. A limit, Valen said, is not the truth of a cadet. A limit is a hypothesis. It is a guess. It is the most polite, most modest, most convenient guess about what a body can do. And I have learned, in these last weeks, that some species do not even bother to track their guesses, because for them the entire point of a limit is to make it move. She looked, briefly, at the small human at the end of the line. He looked back. She did not smile. He did not smile. But something passed between them, the way two people who share a secret can recognize each other across a crowded room. There was a cadet here, 6 weeks ago, Valen said. A small one, from a small, soft species, filed near the bottom of our physical tier. Her name is on the trial records. You can look her up. She walked through a 40-hour endurance march that should have killed her by hour 12, and she stopped twice along the way to help. Last week, she carried 2 wounded peacekeepers across a methane storm on a rim moon, because nobody had told her she could not. The cadets were listening. Every one of them. Even the ones who had not yet learned to listen. She did not do this because she was special, Valen said. She did not do this because her species is great. She did this because she was, by her own honest account, average. She told me so. In my office. With her hands folded in her lap. I have thought about it every day since. Valen took a breath. The Concord, she said, underestimated her people for 16 years. Her people knew. Her people did not correct us. This was not deception. This was, I now understand, simply how humans introduce themselves. They are quiet. Then they show you. She turned, slightly, to look at the wall of her distant office, even though the cadets could not see the wall from here. The old words on my wall, she said, are gone. The slab has been resurfaced. New words will be carved this afternoon. I would like, before you begin your training here, for you to hear them first. She let the silence sit for a moment. Then she said, find out what you are. The cadets were quiet. Several of them did not seem to understand. A Morkin near the front frowned, the way Morkin frowned when they were trying to fit a new idea into an old shape. The Scythen on the third row flickered, uncertain. The Bernari at the back tilted his head. The small human at the end of the line did not look confused. He looked, for the first time, fully relaxed. He understood already. Valen dismissed the cohort to their first drills. The instructors at the edges of the field walked away in silence, talking among themselves in low voices. Some of them were angry. Some of them were thoughtful. Some of them, the youngest, were already writing the new words into their own training notes. Valen walked back to her office alone. Her assistant was already there, standing beside the resurfaced wall, holding the engraving tool. He waited for her to confirm. She nodded. The tool began its slow, careful work. That afternoon, when the new cohort passed Valen's office on their way to lunch, the words on her wall were freshly cut, sharp and clean, and a little brighter than the old stone around them. Find out what you are. The small human cadet, at the end of the line, read the words once as he passed. He did not stop. He did not smile. But he stood, just a fraction, straighter than he had been standing a moment before. Somewhere on a rim moon, a junior peacekeeper named Reyes finished her shift and sat down to eat. She did not know about the wall. She would not know for some time. She had work to do. She kept walking.